On this special edition of Independent Sources, affordable housing. Why is Mayor Bloomberg's plan for the sector getting mixed reviews?
Can anything be done to address the city's housing crisis?
And see who's trying to turn renters into homeowners.
Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre.
And I'm Abby Ashola. Affordable housing. That seems to have become a contradiction in terms in New York City at a time when 1/3 of New Yorkers are paying half of their incomes on rent and 6% of homeowners are behind on their mortgages.
During the next half hour, we'll look at the current state of affordable housing in the city and what, if anything, are the mayoral candidates proposing to alleviate some of the strain on city residents.
We'll begin with Vianora Vinca's interview with Burnell Greer of the Neighborhood Housing Services of New York City and Moses Gates from the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. They talked about the state of affordable housing in the city.
Can you detail on the different types of affordable housing available to New York City residents? There is Section 8, there's Mitchell-Lama plan, and there's rent controlled and rent stabilized. If you could explain to the audience what each plan offers.
Affordable housing in New York City essentially just means any housing that has any type of government subsidy involved. Was built with government subsidy is where tenants are, their rents are subsidized by the government, or even when there's any kind of restrictions on raising the rent. Our biggest affordable housing program is our rent stabilization program. Or our rent regulation program, which encompasses rent stabilization and rent control. And making sure we keep those units in the rent stabilization program is a really big thing. And we lose more units out of rent stabilization every year than we actually build in new affordable housing. So strengthening our rent stabilization programs, getting rid of vacancy decontrol, which is abused, getting rid of a lot of the loopholes that landlords can use to raise rent when they shouldn't.
How are the units lost?
So if you get above a certain threshold, it used to be $2,000, but now $2,500, you can take a unit out of rent stabilization. And this effectively means that anywhere where you can get that as market rate rents, the unit is lost. And this is because there's what was a 1/40th and now is sometimes a 1/40th and sometimes a 1/64th increase, which means if you do improvements to an apartment, you can raise the rent 1/40th of those improvements. The problem is there's no oversight of this program. We issued a report way back in the mid-2000s called the $40,000 stove, which kind of documents how landlords would really just make up these improvements knowing that unless the tenant caught them, they were going to be able to take these out of rent stabilization. So better enforcement of this and better rules for rent stabilization are really key to maintaining affordable housing in New York.
Back in 2004, Mayor Bloomberg initiated the new housing marketplace plan, and that has been hailed generally as having been successful, though some strongly disagree. In your view, Burnell, what have been, starting with a positive, some of the accomplishments of this plan?
Well, some of the accomplishments, or just the positive, are the thousands of units of affordable housing and of housing that has been created under the mayor's plan.
He planned to create 165,000 units, and out of those he managed to create 85%, about 140,000 units.
Correct, correct. And
create or preserve. That's
create or preserve. And also with that, we work, Moses and I both work in the affordable housing arena. And with that, there's a lot of different community-based organizations that have worked in partnership with either for-profit or not-for-profit developers to really help implement the plan and being able to see, again, these local organizations being able to be the managers of properties and being able to help preserve community.
How big an accomplishment is this, Moses?
So I think that it really speaks to the fact that when New York sets a goal, it can accomplish that goal. And I think it's a really remarkable achievement and is due in no small part to our community-based organizations and also to our government employees at the Department of Housing Preservation, Housing Development Corporation, and others. And I think it's, to Mayor Bloomberg's credit to set a real high bar and then to work to clear that bar, I think was a significant accomplishment of his term.
One of the critiques of this plan is that a lot of these newly created units are not affordable really to low-income residents.
So I think in the next mayor's plan going forward, we'd like them to set goals also. We think it should be focused a little bit more on the affordability and a little bit less on the development. And it's correct that about 2/3 of the housing built under the Bloomberg plan was not affordable to people actually in that community board. And it's something where it's difficult to develop truly affordable housing in New York City. This is an expensive place to build. But if we set goals here in New York, and this was shown in the last plan, Mayor Bloomberg's plan, if we set goals here in New York, we can achieve those goals. And if we set goals to make housing truly affordable for our neighborhood residents, I think we can achieve it.
What neighborhoods were the ones where we find these units not being affordable to local residents? Are they mostly poor neighborhoods?
Well, they're what are considered low moderate income neighborhoods, or historically had been low moderate income neighborhoods, where there needed to be more by way of investment. So when you look at areas like Bedford-Stuyvesant, or even looking at Williamsburg and looking at Greenpoint, different areas again where there has been significant housing being created, but when you look at the residents really wanting to remain in the community, they've been outpriced. I wanted to also just say, though, when you use the term affordable housing, it's very different than talking about low moderate income housing. If you can afford to put 1/3 of your income into your overall housing or residence, the cost of your residence, then it's considered affordable. But who is that for? And so it's really looking at preserving for the families that have long been in the community. And the definitions have to be very clear.
Moses, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, one good example that's being marketed right now, or is just finished marketing, is on 1560 Fulton Street in Bed-Stuy, where this is an affordable housing development with a lot of city subsidy in it, and the rents range from about $1,900 for a one-bedroom all the way up to about $2,500 for larger apartments, with incomes ranging from the mid-60,000s to almost $200,000 of people eligible for these government subsidized apartments. And the median income in Bed-Stuy is $35,000. The median income in Crown Heights, which it borders, is $40,000. I would say that $1,900 for a one-bedroom is market rate rents, or maybe even above market rate rents for the neighborhood. So it really gets into these questions of, and this is counted as affordable housing under the new housing marketplace plan. So it really gets into these questions of what do we call affordable and affordable for whom.
Bernal, you touched upon the fact that some people have been pushed out of neighborhoods. Another critique to the Bloomberg plan has been that the homeless population increased considerably during his administration, 73% increase in homeless families, according to the Coalition for the Homeless. It doesn't seem like an affordable place to live in. Bernal? Well,
again, New York is a desirable place. When you look at overall population growth, we're approaching, sort of the 9 million mark in terms of population, so it's very difficult. Again, the demand for housing here is just very strong. And so, yes, the plan, and again, looking at homeless families, or again, people being displaced, it's been difficult. Where do they go in terms of being able to have shelter and across? Some of it is in terms of the mayor's plan and looking at the affordable housing that's being created. Are there enough units for families? But then it's also the economy, and just really looking at what's happened. For neighborhood housing services in the area that we served, we're really into 1 to 4 family home ownership, and the foreclosure crisis has also caused a significant change in the overall community. At first it was predatory lending. Now what we're finding, it's job loss. So it's a lot of other things that create, it's the mayor's somewhat in terms of the type of housing that's being created, but what other factors are there?
Burnell Greer and Moses Gates, thank you both for being in studio with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Still to come, the future of affordable housing, bright or bleak?
There'll be more independent sources after this.
Thanks for staying tuned to a special look at affordable housing in the city.
Earlier, we talked about the successes and failures of Mayor Bloomberg's affordable housing plan. Now we'll examine what the current candidates are proposing and ask if there's any way to truly revamp the city's affordable housing program.
I spoke with City Limits magazine editor Jared Murphy and Rachel Fee, coordinator of the Housing First program. Rachel, it's election season. It seems every night we have some form or another with the candidates on the Democratic and Republican sides. Of all the candidates, which ones do you think their plans actually are realistic and to deal with this problem of affordable housing in the city?
Well, it's hard to say. A few of them have come out with plans and have really put concrete numbers and costs on them, which is great. So Housing First, as you know, is a coalition seeking investment in affordable housing and policy improvements from our next mayor. So we've put forward a plan for 150,000 units over 8 years. It's an $8 billion plan and specific policy recommendations. So, we are really pleased that the candidates are talking about housing, really pleased that they have gone so far as to put out their own plans and are really thinking about this issue seriously. I wouldn't favor one plan over the other.
Getting back to the point that you made earlier about your organization's plan for affordable housing, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that plan.
Sure. So we've put forward this plan. It's a 7-point plan, and we're seeking investment for 60,000 new construction units. 10,000 of those would be for supportive housing, which is housing for homeless disabled families who really need the help. 6,000 units of senior housing, and then the other portion of the plan is 90,000 units of preservation. So it's really making sure that those affordable housing units that need capital repairs to make the building safe and habitable are being maintained. So it's an $8 billion plan. $8 billion plan over 8 years. So compared to existing capital investment by the city and state in New York City, it's about $356 million more a year. But it provides a lot of bang for the buck for the next mayor, because when you build affordable housing, not only are you creating needed housing, but you're also creating jobs, you're leveraging private equity. So the $8 billion leverages another 15 in private equity.
I wanted to bring Jared in here. Is this the first time that housing has taken such a prominent role in a campaign?
No, definitely not the first time. I mean, I think in 2005, Mayor Bloomberg at that point had put forward a plan for, I think, 65,000 units. And his opponent, his Democratic opponent, Fernando Ferrer, put out a much more aggressive plan very close to the election. And Bloomberg basically matched that plan, and that became sort of the second iteration of the new housing marketplace plan, which is what the city's been living under since 2004, 2005. So it's been on the radar screen for many elections, and it makes sense. As we said before we came on the air, New York is a very expensive city, and this is a growing problem. And so that's why you see, I think, the candidates coming forward with plans, with varying degrees of detail, some of them putting numbers in their proposals. To talk about realism is difficult because each of the plans involves not sort of just one big policy, but a mixture of policies. And so the question would be how they all add up. But I think de Blasio's plan, which calls for 190,000 units, new construction and preservation, that involves the use of city pension funds, which is an interesting idea. It's unclear how much volume you get out of that, because they have a responsibility to the pension holders to get good returns on their investment, but it's an interesting idea. Speaker Quinn's plan, I think, targets 80,000, and that revolves mainly around a tax break or a tax cap to try to ensure permanent affordability for units that become affordable. Because you know, one of the issues now is we have affordable housing units that we set up 30 years ago, and they're lapsing out of the program, and so preserving them becomes an important thing. Those elements and how they balance out, I think that's where the realism comes from.
You know, one of the plans that I heard recently is from John Castamatidis about building housing around transportation hubs and stuff like that. This is kind of a novel idea, is it?
You know, I think that good urban planning always tries to build housing around your transit hubs. You know, but I think that candidates right now in the affordable housing community as well are looking for creative solutions to siting affordable housing. So building on top of the, you know, low-level publicly owned buildings and, you know, sites that aren't necessarily, you know, thought of as housing sites or, you know, parking lots, converting them, that sort of thing. We need to be creative because the city has really gone through a lot of the in-rem stock that was developed under New Housing Marketplace.
What is that?
The in-rem stock, that's the buildings and lots that were taken during tax foreclosure, mainly in the 80s. So they've been a great source of affordable housing in the development of a pipeline that doesn't exist for this next mayor.
When we talk about affordable housing, a lot of people sometimes think of low-income housing, but you know, middle class to upper middle class people have affordable housing problems. They're able to solve that by moving out of the city. Mm-hmm. How do poorer people in the city deal with that situation?
Well, some of them don't deal with it very well. That's probably why we have 50,000 people in the homeless shelters, many people doubling up. But it's a complicated issue because affordable housing programs actually do tend to target folks, maybe not at the very lowest end of the income spectrum, but people about 60% of area median income, which is a very rough and somewhat crude measure of income in this area of the country. So one of the challenges for affordable housing planners, and I think this has come up in the mayoral campaign, is, you know, if you want to target people who are slightly above or below that income, how do you do that? Because the federal funding that kind of underwrites a lot of affordable housing production, it's difficult to apply to different income levels. It's something that Bloomberg has tried to do. He's been criticized in some cases for targeting some affordable housing to people who, on paper at least, looked like they could afford their own. But that definitely is one of the kind of choice points that affordable housing planners have to deal with is, do you reserve that housing for people who are, you know, truly at the low end, or do you try to have a diverse mix?
Okay.
I would just add to that, you know, the area median income is set by HUD at the federal level, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So we don't have a lot of control over that, and a lot of our financing tools are tied to, you know, like 60% AMI, as Jarrett was indicating. But there are some policies that this next mayor can make that would allow for more income diversity. For example, Housing First has been a proponent of project-basing Section 8 vouchers. Mm-hmm. And what that means is you use a Section 8 voucher to...
And for those of us who don't know what
sure.
Section 8 is,
Section 8, yeah,
quickly,
it's rental assistance program. Okay. So it allows the household to pay no more than 30% of their income. So, you know, if you have somebody at 20% of AMI in a neighborhood who needs housing, although you're underwriting at the 60% because that's what your financing mix allows, you can use a voucher to target deeper affordability. And I think that's an important tool. Housing First is actually calling for a deputy mayor of housing because we do have, you know, about 130,000 Section 8 vouchers in the city between two agencies, and a coordinated strategy of how to best and most effectively use them could really go a long way to helping the 50,000 people sleeping in our homeless shelters, and also helping to build more affordable housing.
The Wall Street Journal published an article, and they did a poll with NBC for New York with Marist. 85% of New Yorkers feel that the city is not very affordable or not affordable at all. But what's interesting is that they say that they don't think the city hall can make housing cheaper. Mm-hmm. How do you respond to that?
I think that's very interesting. I think partly that reflects a sort of general lack of confidence in government. You could put any problem out there, and some people would say this government can't solve it. But I do think I mean, the government has done a lot to support affordable housing in the city, and the federal and the state and local level. We talked about Section 8, we've talked about the Bloomberg program. I mean, it's been there. The question is about degree. This is a huge problem. And I think one of the things that we sometimes don't talk about when talking about affordable housing is there is a housing cost issue at play here, right? It's an expensive city to live in. Partly that's fed by speculation, partly by the fact that it's an expensive city to live. But there's also an income element to this problem. You know, we have in the city, parallel to this housing crisis, a growing income inequality gap of people who, you know, truly don't have as much as you know, the kind of elites who run the city. And if you look at, you know, some of the proposals, even for like the living wage that was battled about a couple years ago, if you earn the living wage and you're spending 30% of your income on housing, which is about what you're supposed to, you can afford an apartment that, you know, rents at about $520 a month. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're married, that's $1,000 bucks. But still, that limits really what you can do in terms of housing in this city. So government's trying to fill a gap that the economy has created between what people earn and what they can afford housing-wise. And so I think the income aspect of the problem probably undergirds people's lack of confidence.
Same question to you, Rachel. Is government unable to do anything that in the mind of the people?
I think, of course, government has to do something. It's a pressing issue. You know, 1 in 3 New Yorkers is spending more than half of their pre-tax income on rent. When you look at low-income New Yorkers, it's 2 out of 3. So we do need our next mayor to put forward a plan for affordable housing, and it has to be a comprehensive plan and really touching on, you know, what the affordable housing issue is for the folks that are homeless up through people who are homeowners. You really need to look at this comprehensively and look at new construction. You know, we have another million people moving into the city, you know, until, you know, between now and 2030, right? So we're going to have more pressure on the demand side, or it's the supply side, more demand on the supply side. And, you know, we have some real affordability issues on, you know, every type of housing in New York.
Bloomberg saw himself as reinventing New York City. They had Dr. Deputy Mayor, concentrate on all these huge projects. And there's been a lot of building going on in the inner cities, East New York and South Bronx. How much impact do you think he's had on this issue?
I think he's had a huge impact. I think that depending on how you feel about the mayor, how you grade that impact is the interesting thing. I mean, the physical legacy that Mayor Bloomberg will have is immense. The amount of the city that's been rezoned under him is you know, it's just massive. And that has had a huge effect on the progress of a lot of neighborhoods and on affordability there. I mean, one of the things that I think has vexed some people during the Bloomberg years is he had this very aggressive affordable housing plan. But at the same time, we were losing more and more units of housing to just the natural course of the economy. Mm-hmm. And some of that was probably fed by, you know, development strategies that focused on luxury development, that focused on changing neighborhoods in that manner. So I think, you know, when you look at the net gain that we've had over the last few years or net loss in affordable housing, the interplay of those two strands of policy is what's important.
Unfortunately, we have to leave this conversation here. Thanks very much. Rachel Fee, Jared Murphy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. When we come back, going from renting a nightmare to owning a dream.
Finally, we've told you a lot about how unaffordable it can be to live in the city. But now we want to show you how some organizations, like Habitat for Humanity, are trying to make it easier for low-income New Yorkers to actually become homeowners.
Sarah Pizon filed this report.
Rochelle Rayford is one of the many New Yorkers that struggle to find affordable housing in New York City. She lived in the Marzi Houses development in Bedford-Stuyvesant with her 2 children for more than 30 years. Then, when her son moved out more than 4 years ago, she was forced to downsize.
I actually landed in an area that was heavily drug infested. Actually ended up next door to a young lady that was on drugs, and she had mental issues. And so she would do things like bang on my doors and windows 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
She says her $965 a month apartment was a nightmare.
We lived like hermits in our apartment. because of the rats, you couldn't open the windows, so we never ever could get any outside air. The windows stayed shut 24/7, and the apartment was hot like an oven because we were on the first floor right over the boiler.
Rochelle's 19-year-old daughter, Kiana, hated their home and started spending more time on the streets at night.
You have a teenage daughter, she doesn't want to come home at night. It started to really, really bother me to the point that I knew that I had to take immediate action.
She tried but struggled for a few years to find an available and affordable new rental apartment.
It's just not possible to find affordable housing in New York, and especially not a affordable apartment, but a home. I was like, that was like foreign. There is no such thing. That was my experience, you know.
It's an experience shared by many residents in a city beset by an affordable housing crisis. Market forces are eliminating affordable housing units faster than the city can add them. Statistics show that half of New Yorkers are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. Matthew Dunbar says the issue is due to skewed area median income numbers that help the city determine market prices.
AMI stands for Area Median Income, which basically takes a look at the city at large and analyzes the incomes for the entire population, which means that people in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, or in Bed-Stuy, the area median income doesn't take the neighborhood into account because they're actually being analyzed through an entire city, which includes higher income communities.
Dunbar says the current citywide area median income is approximately around $70,000 per family. So even rents in the least expensive neighborhoods are beyond the reach of low-income workers, making it harder for people like Rochelle Rayford to find homes.
Welcome to a Habitat home. This is one of our 3-bedroom units here at St. John's Residences.
That's where Habitat for Humanity New York City comes in. Their Brooklyn initiatives offers affordable homes for families making $35,000 to $60,000 a year. This is one of the buildings in East New York that Rochelle calls home.
It was always something that I thought I couldn't do, being a single parent, being a one-income household. I never thought I could do that.
She actually did it in less than 9 months. Rayford has a 30-year mortgage at a fixed 2% interest rate. And the best part of the deal, she only made a 1% down payment. But she also had to put in 400 hours of sweat equity, a model that helps future homeowners build their own homes.
You paint, you put in cabinets, you put down floors, you lay tile, but everything they teach you is really, really good because they really just try to prepare you to take care of your own home when you purchase.
Families here will be living here for 30 years and more and be able to pass their their home on to their families and have the opportunity for generational ownership, building equity, and really having a stable place to live in the face of really skyrocketing rental costs.
There is a sense of pride when you own. It's different. Like when it's, because now I don't let people do too much in my house. In my apartment, you could do anything. I didn't care. I was like, whatever, okay. I mean, but in my house, I'm like, no, you can't do that. Not my house. Like, I mean, it's just you care more.
Habitat for Humanity's next goal is to bring on a similar plan to Queens. For Independent Sources, I'm Sarah Pizan.
That's our special look at affordable housing this month. We invite you to tune in August when we'll examine the trend toward new immigrants running for political office.
And we'll profile one of the ethnic candidates running in the upcoming city elections. Till then, be independent-minded.